the one thing I continually learn from First Nations peoples of Australia is we have to do it together. We have to walk together in going forward. And we've got to make sure that we all do it together and there's no like leaving anyone behind.
Hey folks, welcome to the latest episode of the Ecosystem Member Podcast. Our guest for this episode is Majell Backhausen, an Australian ultrarunner and all-around super interesting human. As you'll hear in the episode, I came across Majell through Patagonia's 4-part film series of his run across the proposed Great Forest National Park outside of Melbourne, Australia. That nearly 300-kilometer run took just under 50 hours to complete and was the story that helped illuminate the many reasons, from protecting endangered animals to securing a critical water supply for Melbourne, that it is important to protect that ecosystem. In addition to his Great Forest run, Majell has an envy-inducing list of running adventures on his website, alongside links to films he has been in or made as part of his experiences. Make sure to follow him on Instagram at the handle MAJELLB. That's MAJELLB. We'll also throw some links directly to his films in the show notes. Many thanks to Majell, who joined us before taking off on another adventure to Nepal. So without further delay, here's the latest episode of the Ecosystem Member Podcast with ultrarunner and human, Majell Backhausen. Today on the Ecosystem Member Podcast, we have awesome human and ultrarunner Majell Backhausen. Thanks for joining us today, Majell.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's great to be here.
So you're an ultrarunner, which means you spend a lot of time, obviously, in wild and natural spaces across those long distances, and a lot of time sort of moving through those natural spaces. So by way of like doing a formal bio at this stage, can you share a little bit more about your background and how that informs your relationship with nature?
Yeah, for sure, man. You know, running as a whole is an incredible element to have in life. You know, it's an incredible way to spend a lot of time in life. It's something that's taken me many places, and it's kind of funny because I really started my running journey in the city streets of London. And yeah, you say it's like you run a lot through wild and natural places. I've definitely run a lot through concrete jungles as well. And yeah, definitely done a lot of that to really kind of test the boundaries of my love for running. But within that, yeah, like it's an incredible thing to be able to have as a hobby or as a habit or as as an addiction in some regards. And it's really allowed me to see the world in many different facets. You know, I think as a runner, which is probably very similar to a lot of people that have that urge to get outside and do a sport that they love, be it walking or kayaking or climbing. You know, you've got to sometimes, if you really have that love for it, you've got to really be responsible for making it a part of your day. And that could be getting up super early or running really late. I remember being in America once actually, and just to be honest, I think me and my mates were traveling, and we went and ate a buffet at an Indian restaurant, and then felt so sick that I had this huge urge to go and run. But it was like minus 20 degrees outside, and the streets were like covered in ice. But I was out there and went for like, I don't know, a 45-minute run or something. And just to be able to see the world in that way was one of those things that I'm like, geez, running really does get you out of the door and get you to see some incredible things. Contrast to that, being able to see really, really like remote and beautiful places that really kind of just stay with you for a very, very, very long time in your memory, and make us the people we are. Running is an amazing thing for everyone to experience. And for me, it's been just an absolute gateway to a world that I couldn't have dreamed of or imagined in many, many regards.
And running has also been a gateway in terms of how I discovered and connected with you. So I saw you first in Patagonia's end-to-end video series, covering your run across the proposed Great Forest that's outside of Melbourne. You ran for a little under 300 kilometers, I think, just under 50 hours of running. And on your website, you write that you're actually more interested in the why than the how. So why did you embark on this experience, running end to end across the Great Forest?
You know, I hope, to be honest, I hope in some regards that comes across in the film series. Yeah, it's a 4-part series that's available on the Patagonia YouTube. And in that part of the world, it's home to just so many incredible plant species and animals as well. A lot of them are endangered, and a lot of them are one part of an incredible ecosystem that a lot of experts consider to be on the verge of collapse due to the threats that surround it and that are present within it. So that's things like logging and also the threat of mining and natural causes like wildfires and things like that. The film was using running as a common thread or a common ground for people to relate to the journey, and as a way to be educated on what exists out there, what threatens it, the opportunities that are there for people, and the opportunities that that whole great expanse has for the people of Melbourne, the people of Australia, and just the people of the world in regards to so many things like better health, greater recreation, deeper understanding with the traditional owners, deeper connection with working together in that space. And yeah, it's just like there's a whole lot to it. And really, the motivating factor for me, or the why, is to just have that sense of education, and hopefully that leads to action for greater protection of those places.
What I was pretty jealous of, having done some trail running myself, is, in the video series, you sort of see you go through these lush canopies. I know the Great Forest is home to the largest tree ferns on the planet. And you see this incredible point where you come across the first big clearing that has been logged. What was it like? Yes, as someone who many people have probably walked through that, but actually running through that and switching environments so drastically, so quickly. Like, what were you feeling when you came across that first big clearing?
Really, there's a lot of things that you experience when you do come across any clearing, or they call it a coop out there. Yeah, you are running in a huge forest that's very dense. Naturally, it's very dense with different plant species. And when you come to a coop or a clearing, I think the one thing that you start to really feel and see is the huge amount of sunlight that's there, and also the intensity of the heat that happens. So you walk up to a coop, and yeah, there's no shade. The ground is very dry, and so the heat from the sun and the ground just kind of radiates up into you, and you can just get this real sense of heat. And you start to realize, like, whoa, there is not the sounds that are here, there's not the moisture that's here. It kind of feels like a bit of what you'd think, like Mars would be like in some regard, a bit of a wasteland war zone. Yeah, like the elephant's graveyard in The Lion King. And yeah, so you really do feel things, and then you think things. You're just like, damn, there's just like no life here. Well, there's very little life because, yes, small shoots are coming up again because nature has an incredible way of regenerating itself in many regards. Although, yeah, it takes a very, very long time for that regeneration to become like a full ecosystem again, like an old growth forest. So it's a real sensory experience in many regards, because your mind is like, oh shit, this sucks, and then your body is feeling the heat, and you're like, oh, I just like would love to get back out of here. And when you get back in the forest, it's like this breath of fresh air again. You can kind of feel the moisture, your body temperature cools down a bit, you're protected, you can hear the bird noise, it's like softer underfoot because it's lush ground. And yeah, it's kind of everything in many regards, which is really cool.
I think the video does a really fantastic job, as you highlighted some of them there, pointing out the web of issues that come from this logging practice. I think the professor David Lindemeyer, I think was his name, talks about how it takes 200 plus years once a space is cleared for that to sort of return to life, where it can be an animal habitat again, in a fully functioning ecosystem, as you point out. And that also has an impact on already endangered species who are losing even more habitat. And I think the video talks about how a fraction of or a small percentage of that timber is actually used as fine timber. A lot of it ends up going to waste. So it seems kind of crazy. And then on top of all of that, like that forest is a critical water source for Melbourne. So once you start to piece all these elements together, I think people might understand one piece of it or another piece of it, but as someone who's sort of experienced this firsthand, like how or why do you think the majority of people still see these issues and then also these spaces sort of isolated and disconnected from themselves? Like clearly there's a relationship that we have with this web of life that comes from these forests.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really have to go too far to kind of get a sense of why that would be. Life's busy. Life's busy, and the mind has so many distractions and only a limited amount of bandwidth or attention to give to a lot of things. And I think more than half of the world now living in urban environments, we definitely have a disconnect to a more natural world. And when you do that, like for sure, you just don't have it as a presence in your life, and you don't have that connection to it, or you're not really attuned to it. You don't really see how it plays a role in your life or why it needs to play a role in your life. And you can say it for so many things, like the disconnect between people's food and what they eat and that whole situation. There's so many elements to that whole piece. And the real important thing about getting outside, or just finding a patch of grass, getting your feet on it. Like, I don't want it to sound too woo woo or hippie, but like, it's just so important to go and connect with the natural world. A lot of people have such busy lives that that's incredibly hard to do. And, even I've got my own excuses sometimes for not going and putting my feet on the ground without putting them in a pair of shoes or without touching concrete all day. And so yeah, there's just a big disconnect there, and to kind of put that pressure on people to be like, hey, you need to be aware of the issues that are going on in the forest that's an hour away. It's like, dude, I'm busy. I've got kids. I've got stuff to do. I can't even get like a 30-minute gym session in because I've got to work, I've got kids, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And now you want me to like also worry about this forest. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's hard to point fingers when everyone's got their own shit to deal with. The beautiful thing is when people do get out there, like we had an event out there recently. When people do get out there, it just really does hit home how important it is to go and breathe some of that fresh air. Because yeah, like that air quality out there is some of the best in the world as well, and you really get a sense for that, and it's an incredible privilege to be able to say like, I know how important all that is because I've been able to spend so much time out there and experience so much of that.
Have you noticed a change in Australia? Obviously, I think the wildfires over the last 2 decades have really been a flashpoint for even the global conversation around the climate crisis. Have people become more interested, more aware, more have more desire to go out and sort of put their feet in the dirt and go to places like this, and then that helps make that connection easier? Like, has any of that changed with the recent spate of wildfires over the last 2 decades?
Yeah, man, that's a real complex one in so many regards. Like the 2019, 2020 fires that happened because it goes over our summer period, which yeah, spans over the different years. That was just so horrific for so many reasons. And it was a real moment where we thought there would be a lot of change as a result. But along came COVID, and the issue of those wildfires really almost like it just got forgotten quite quickly, which, there's many reasons for that. And that whole complexity with fires, there's a lot of fear associated with that. There's a lot of fear associated with going into the bush or the forest. We call it the bush, but going into the forest, like there's a lot of fear associated with doing that on hot days and in the summer. And yeah, like that's almost when you're in the real old growth forest, it's safe because it's wet. There's an ecosystem there that like self protects itself, and it's really in the disturbed areas of the bush and forest that are more prone to fire danger. So like it's like go out there, but people are scared. be like, well, we've got to go out there to appreciate it more, to then want to protect it more. But there's a lot of factors that need to be overcome so we have some progress in that area. Because if we protect it, then it does a job of naturally protecting itself. It's like there's two snowballs, and like each snowball builds its own momentum as it goes downhill, but like one snowball's kind of in motion at the moment as opposed to the other one, which is more protection. And so we kind of like all need to jump from the one of fear and degradation over to the one of protection and regeneration.
To talk about another complex issue, during your run, you experience a ceremony for safe travel with one of the elders of the people indigenous to the land. And it's really not uncommon to see land acknowledgements on websites of Australian businesses. Also on your website, you have one. And yet there was a recent referendum that failed in Australia to formally recognize First Nations people in the Constitution, create a voice to Parliament, sort of Indigenous advisory board. Like, I don't want to talk necessarily about Australian politics, but do you think we can have a positive relationship with nature in this is across many countries, including my own in the US, when we don't necessarily have a positive relationship with the original inhabitants and stewards of the land?
Well, we have to, in many regards. The moment you speak of there is what's referred to as a welcome to country. And we got to do that with a gentleman called Perry Wandon, who's a Tanarong elder, on top of Mount Donabuang, just outside of Warburton. And Perry's an incredible man, incredible human. And that Great Forest, the proposed Great Forest National Park, takes into consideration the lands of the Wurundjeri, the Tanarong, and also the Gunai Kurnai. Sorry, Perry's an elder of the Wurundjeri peoples. The one thing I continually learn from First Nations peoples of Australia is we have to do it together. We have to walk together in going forward. And we've got to make sure that we all do it together and there's no like leaving anyone behind. And they're so forthcoming in that it really is incredible, you know, when you look at what's happened within colonialization in Australia and all over the world, for the First Nations people to be the ones that say, look, we need to do this together if it's going to be successful. Like we've got to walk hand in hand, we've got to walk side by side, we've got to do this together, is incredible. Because, you know, I know a lot of people in like the colonial society or the people that have come to these lands and taken it would be like, no, I'm not forgiving you. Like, no way. There's no real option to go forward and protect a lot of the natural places of this world. There's no way we can do that going forward with leaving people behind. It's such a social issue as much as it is an environmental issue. Like they're intertwined. They're absolutely together. And who doesn't want to do that, you know? Like who doesn't want to be able to have solidarity and build those bridges and get everyone eating from the same table?
As we move towards an end, I do want to end on a little bit of a high note, because from my research online, I found that the Great Forest National Park is still in the proposed stage, but it does look like the Victorian government has brought forward the end of logging in that area from the end of this year, so the end of 2023. So definitely a ton of progress. With that great success, like what did you take away from your time in the Great Forest? You know, what have you taken away from some of these other ultra runs that you've done in these amazing natural environments? Like what do you kind of leave feeling when you go through those experiences?
Yeah. Dude, epic job on the research there. Give yourself a shout out for getting a lot of that dialed. I think, yeah, it was great news when Victorian government brought forward the end of native forest logging. It's certainly a huge win, a huge thing. But there's still a lot of work to go. I know you want to finish more on a high, but yeah, like there's definitely a lot of work to go. And but it was incredible when that happened. I remember sitting at my desk and I was just like holding back tears in many regards. And you know, holding back tears because I really did feel a huge sense of connection. I still do with that part of the world. And I think doing that run and spending a lot of time out there, a lot of hours running out there, similar with a lot of hours running in different parts of the world, you know, like just taking a small little backpack and being somewhat self-supported, running in places like the Sahara Desert and also like across the mountains in Nepal and doing big missions, even in America, where you really just realize how much you don't need in this world, and how liberating it can be to just leave all of your possessions except for the bare essentials wherever at home, and just head out on the trails for a week, and just be like, whoa, like, geez, we don't really need a whole lot to be like, to feel so alive, and to just really like enjoy these moments that we get afforded. To answer your question, it really, the big thing is just like, yeah, how little we do need to really have an incredible deep connection to, people and places, and to really feel that sense of community and fulfillment. I don't want to just churn out fucking all these words that get used these days, but damn, it feels good. Like, it just feels good and great to be able to be in those places, and feel like you are, in the right position on the food chain, as humans actually are. Because damn, we can think we're like way bigger than we actually are in the grand scheme of things, and that's like a huge issue. So yeah, to kind of feel that small and insignificant again, and have nothing on our back, is like, yeah, it has been a real joy to experience.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much, Majell, for taking time to chat today. It's super enjoyable to get to learn a little bit more about your run, and also your work on some of these issues. So really appreciate it, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rick. Yeah, have a good one, man. I'll chat to you soon.